Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I am so excited to introduce you to our guest. Before I do that, here's a quote just for this episode. The world is benefiting from the selling of an industry hooked on selling. The word hooked has a negative connotation because it implies someone is addicted. So does the word drug, which is on the front of the book. I had to balance my ethics between the use of these words and accurately describing the point I am making and the character traits I share throughout this book. The truth is, negative connotation or not, these are the right words to describe our behaviors, including mine, for the better part of most of my career. These are the proper words to describe the best in class I have borne witness to, who survive bad markets and difficult times and yet prevail again and again. Christine Beckwith, author of Hi, Selling is a Drug, and so many more. Welcome back to this episode of the Culture Matters podcast to talk about chapter 2 called Hooked of your new book. Thanks for coming
Thank
back.
you. Thanks for having me. Glad to be back. Very exciting.
So, to address the naysayers or the critics or the curious,
Yeah.
selling is a drug. That's a bold statement.
Yeah.
Chapter 2, Hooked. What's the value of the metaphors?
Yeah. I mean, the whole book purpose is to take a reader who is in a selling position. It specifically speaks about the mortgage industry and highlights the mortgage industry, but it really is applicable to anybody that has ever been in a sales job. And I really believe there is a difference between people that choose the profession. I think everybody chooses it for different reasons, but I think there's a lot of people that choose it who think they can do it really well and don't do it really well. I think there's people that do it okay. I think there's people that get in it that fail. And again, this book is geared towards the great. Like, I want people that are already professional athletes of selling to pick up this book, because the thing about the class of pedigree in top sales that delineates somebody that can actually become, the elite is something I keep referring to in the book as somebody that has the selling soul. And I really believe this chapter dives very deeply into why did I pick the title Selling is a Drug? It's kind of funny because so many people have reached out to me since I announced the name of the book. And said, that is so good. That is such a good name. That is so true. And I know when I'm talking to people that are saying that they completely understand without me saying another sentence. The title itself grabs this person that has a selling soul. Um, it's funny because I've had other people say to me, "Wow, I'm shocked that you picked the word drug on your cover of a book. Like, don't you think that has like a negative connotation?" And I said, "Well, it depends on what your relationship is with the selling addiction." And how you feel about catching the bug. I'll take this out of selling for a moment and tell you that somewhere in my life, I learned how to ski. I was a skier for years, decades. And in my era of age, snowboarding became a brand new sport. So somewhere in my 20s, snowboards appeared. They were not prevalent or even around when I was a teenager. But in my 20s, skiing, and I grew up, in a mountainous area in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, where there's tons of ski resorts and ski mountains. All of a sudden, these new fad snowboarders showed up. And my first feeling on it was just like, it's for the young kids. And I knew it was very different than skiing. And so where I'm going with this is that I decided at some point to start to snowboard. And I was in and around people that were doing it. I was warned it was really difficult to learn, and could be very harmful, easier to learn as a child because your legs are hooked into one ski more or less. And when you fall, you cannot, when you fall in skiing, you can put a leg out to break your fall. And believe me when I tell you, breaking a fall is a whole thing. You have to break the impact of your body hitting the ground. With snowboarding, that's not true. You hit the ground hard. And so learning at 26 or 27 how to snowboard was extremely dangerous for me as an adult. And somewhere in the next year to 2 years, as I began to really dedicate myself to snowboarding, I got hooked. And what I mean by that is I fell and fell and fell, and I wasn't happy, doing it. I couldn't understand, what I was missing. Turning was super scary. And then just one day I made this turn coming down this mountain, and I caught the edge of my snowboard, and I accelerated, and the next thing I know, I was like surfing on snow. And I would say surfing applies to this too. And when you catch a wave for the first time as a snowboarder and you don't go down and you ride the wave, it is adrenaline pumping. And you remember the feeling you're having in the moment. And I remember exactly how I felt when I hooked that turn, and then I hooked all the turns behind it. Suddenly I was surfing on snow. And man, I felt like I was on top of the world, and the adrenaline kicked in. And from that point, I wanted to do nothing but snowboard. Prior to that, I would ski some days. Some days I would, because it was hard, even though I was attracted to doing it. And so I think selling is the same thing. And I think that the people that catch a selling soul have to break beyond the barrier of success in selling. Selling sales, if it eludes you, it can be daunting. It can be stressful. It can feel like you're not sure of your next paycheck. It can feel like, I'm not, internally, like, what am I missing? I think social media is the same way, by the way. There's so many people that social media eludes, and they never have monetary conversion, and they're trying to figure it out, and they're following, bad advice, and they're not doing it right. And so my book is going to unpack all of the tactical matter that will get you to the place where you can break through and beyond. I would guess that people that want to break beyond are going to read this book, and they're either going to get some incredible tactical advice that helps them do that. The people that have broke beyond, it's going to inspire and motivate and remind them of why they got hooked in the first place on selling. And so this chapter kind of really dives deeply into that place in selling, um, where you undoubtedly are breaking beyond, the level where you're becoming addicted to the sport of selling. And so I didn't see any other way forward than to have a title in the book and then address what I think makes top salespeople. Again, I'm not a textbook trainer. I didn't research to write this book. My research is derived from 24 years of senior level leadership. It's derived from being a salesperson myself all my life and still today. And it's actually not just based on my own breakthroughs and success, but that of those people that I intersected with my whole career that just freaking blew me away. And today I'm still surrounded by some of the best in class in the mortgage industry. So the book opens, as you know, with the grind, and it talks about kind of the ether effect of the hard worker. And it moves into that place beyond that where you're doing the hard work and you begin to see the results and you get hooked. And I do address the title of the book and addiction in this chapter. I do understand that addiction is a negative connotation for something that you're stuck with that's bad for you, but this is something that you're stuck with that's good for you. Workaholics for years, benefited from overtime and more return, only to be met with, people that have come in and given that a negative connotation and said, man, but then you got to step back and look at the Tim Grovers of the world that write books like Relentless, and people that use the word obsessed, which I think is a word that lazy people use to pick on people that are incredibly hardworking and intelligent about their profession. I'm obsessed with what I do. My passion has not waned 5 or 6 years in. It hasn't waned through tough markets. Um, and so because of that ether effect, I know that, I understand that I'm speaking through this book to the people that want the sport of selling.
What are some of the variables that almost like I visualize a fish with a hook in its mouth that's going to be caught that unhook the fish, what are some variables that can unhook someone, screw
Yeah.
undermine their getting hooked?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I do talk about failure throughout the book. Every time I talk about what will make you successful in a specific chapter on a specific tactic, I will also lay down what I saw with the failing ranks of that particular tactic. The most prevalent things I see is a lack of self-management. We're in an entrepreneurial world, and a lot of people pick this world because they want flexibility. And that can go one of two ways. People that are not great at getting themselves up and getting through a regimented routine and sitting themselves down when there's no clock to punch and there's no boss to say, hey, it's time to sit at your desk. They don't fare well in a self-employed world. Um, the people who really truly can self-manage, not only self-manage, but understand the components within a workday that need to be focused on, understand their own distractions, understand what it takes. They're the people that I let me finish that sentence. They're the people that are going to succeed. Um, I remember when I moved over to a commission-based job, I got into the seat and I was leaving a $52,000 base salary, which, by the way, I thought I was richer than rich at that point in my life. I was very young. $52,000 was more than my parents made combined income any year of their life at that point in my life. And I was making that alone as a young woman on a salary doing government processing. And it was a huge leap. I realize now, thank God I did it at 21, because I don't know where else you go from, like, some of these operations people that make 200,000-300,000 a year and they decide they want to make $500,000 a year. It's a huge leap financially to lose that stable paycheck. But I remember thinking when they were giving me my commission opportunity breakdown, like what I could earn, sight unseen, never having written my own individual loan or gone and gotten one. My question was very telling about my mindset. And I said, what's the ceiling? Like, what's the cap on what I can make? And my interviewer, which was Jim Thalen, who I mentioned in this book in my mention section, who gave me my first job as a loan originator, he laughed and he was like, there's no ceiling. Like I was like, you mean if I sell 20, like I can do 20 of these like a month? And he's like, I guess you possibly could. Um, and so I just had that like unlimitless mindset of like, holy crap. And I can still remember when my checks got big over, for me to make a $10,000+ paycheck in a month, I was going home and I was like running to the bank because back then you got hard checks, by the way. There was no automatic deposit and you had to go to the bank and deposit them. And I remember like racing to deposit my checks like it was too good to be true. Like if I didn't cash this, it was
No.
going to just disappear in my hands. I just wanted to get it into my bank account. And just looking at those checks, it was so unbelievable. And I operated with that mindset. Like I just was like, how much can I make? How much can I make? Um, I would reach heights in my career where I received an override over 1,250 loan originators, and I received a piece of every single originator's action, um, which is 12 years of climbing to a place, where you have that type of a mission. And, there were months where my paychecks were over $200,000, and I just really know today as I write this book that I am not somebody that's more gifted than the next person. I am not somebody that's more intelligent than the next person. I would put my work ethic up against anybody, but I would tell you that my breakthrough places where I have that tenacity, which I talk about in the opening of the book of The Grind, which I did a video on, that place where people sit down and fail and quit. And I think even hard workers and breakthrough people sit down and catch their breath. I mean, you cannot, if you've ever seen a great army movie, I don't remember what movie this is, but I want to say it's in A Few Good Men. No, it's not. It's in the movie with Richard Gere where he falls in love with that mill worker. The hell is the name of that? Someone will recognize this when they're listening to the podcast, but he's in boot camp and he can't get over the wall and he's running. They're like, and he's just, and soon enough, like all of his, peers are coming back from going over the wall and they're like yelling at him. And then suddenly he has this like cheering section and it just, he sits down and he's like ready to quit. And he's like got tears in his eyes and he's like pounding the ground and he's breathing hard. And it's that mental place. You recognize it, like, where you're just like, this is the make or break. It is. That's why they call it breakthrough. Because we break and it's in our places that we sit in those broken moments that we're going to rise and beat it. And I've had to do that theoretically in my psychological mind. I've had to do it physically in my, business sense in life. And so Hooked is about the breakthrough. Hooked is the place where the losers are left behind. And I hope that the chapter speaks to people reading it because they're all going to resonate with the message, I think, of whether they're going to get to that next level. And so in my mind, I'm warming the reader up for what's coming in the book because this book climbs. This book starts with the theory of the hard worker, goes to the place of the addiction, and then it's going to take the reader on a ride.
What role does recognition play?
I think, it's funny, but I'm going to say 80% of top producers are motivated by some level of recognition. And I don't mean covers of magazines and stages, which is the ultimate place that, some of the elite, because I'm going to be honest with you, losers are attracted to that too. People that don't have great results. Unfortunately, the one downside of social media is that we can prop ourselves up and make ourselves look more important, more successful than our results have actually merited. I'm a person that looks beyond the lens of those types of spotlights to see what the person I'm sitting in. And I remember sitting, and I write about this in this book. I remember sitting in Vegas at 26 years old, several years into my career. I was at the top of the sales ranks and I was thirsty for more of what I'm doing right now with High, which is looking towards those people that have had massive success and asking myself what my limits are. And believe me, this book goes there. We get to a place called the upper limits, and it is the top of the mountain. It is that beyond average place where it gets fucking crazy good. And I was sitting in Vegas and this known speaker, and I can't remember his name, very familiar name back in the day, sales guy. He was one of the top sales speakers, right up there with Dale Vermillion at the time, the era of selling. It's on the tip of my tongue. But anyways, he was in his 30s and he was doing a ton of business. But in order for me to sit in that room in Vegas at the Paris, brand new, by the way, we were there year one that the hotel opened. And this guy I needed to know he had done it and was doing it because I did not want to be taught by somebody that was just showing up and saying, this is how you do it when they don't know themselves. Because there's a different language We, at my last job, somebody hired a trainer for sales. And I met with the guy after he was hired, and I knew he would fail. And I knew he would fail because when I sat with him for the very first time, I asked him where he came from and what he had done. And I realized he had never done our job. He was a corporate trainer. He was from outside our business, and he could not get below that surface speak. People that have a playbook is one thing. And this is my playbook, by the way. Um, and so you can bring out plays, but the language becomes very different when you're talking to a player who is at an elite level. Because somebody that doesn't know how to do plays, that new football player that has that coach and their playbook is out and you're in the locker room and you've got it up on the whiteboard and you're theoretically saying, and you're going to go right and you're going to go left and then you're going to do this and you're going to do that. That guy's like hanging on every word that that person's saying because they don't know. They don't know the difference. And so there's so many leaders that say they're great at being sales managers in our industry, and sure, they can help the new guy. They can get the new guy up and running, I think, and onto the field. But to get the team to win and to win over the elite players, there's a language that defines you. And I think, when I decided to become a coach, I knew I would be vetted. I knew that people that would hire me would look at my career, they'd Google me, they'd go down the rabbit hole looking for my wins. And I knew they'd find them. I knew they'd never find me losing. They'd never find me failing. They'd never find me in the mid or bottom levels of any sales rankings. And it's funny because there's so much I came across moving into this house a couple of years ago, folders upon folders of my manually printed stats as an originator. And the very last month where I left origination, which I was a branch manager doing origination with 15 LOs, I closed 28 units. And in that day, that was so elite. It was like the 2% of my national sales force. I was at my mountaintop. I had a junior LO, a guy by the name of Brad Spelling, who would write my loans for me. I was literally the handoff. I had an LOA, which was before LOAs existed. She was considered a marketing assistant. I had an admin, and the four of us for the final 2 years of my, origination were this machine. And my referral network was just, it was nothing for me to get 20 leads a week by referral. And so I say all of this because when I get up and I talk and I give lectures, which I'm going to be lecturing on this book, I've done 3 live lectures on this book and I'm about to do 2 more coming up, one for the Notorious Conference coming in Austin and then another one for NAM. I'm doing the high lecture, which I'm excited to do. I dive deeply into sales conversation, and I'm going to tell you where that's going to grab the audience is with the performers. When I'm trying to get an executive to buy a consulting contract, if I feel what they need is something we can help them with, I am not overselling myself. I am not saying like, you have 100 LOs, great, I'm going to make 100 winners. What I'm saying is, here's what you're going to have. If you show me what you've got, I'm going to tell you what I can get you. If you show me how you feed that engine, I'm going to tell you what's missing. If you show me your numbers and we're not getting the most out of it, I'm going to wrench the towel dry. But I'm going to tell you, you're going to have 20 people that won't do this, that will fail to start. You're going to have another 20 people that start and quit. You're going to have another 20 people that advance by 0.5 or 1 unit a month. And then you're going to have 40% that are average or better that are going to double their production. And those are the people we're looking for. And so you don't know that unless you've already tried for 24 years, like I have, to get people to perform and poured yourself in and sat on the sidelines watching whether they can do it or not to understand those statistics. And my stats were always high. I had very low attrition. People didn't quit me. Very healthy attrition. They left for promotions because, there wasn't enough where we were, or other reasons, personal reasons, but we didn't have quitters because of lack of success, which is prevalent in sales teams. When you see turnover, one of the first things I measure when I take on consulting is their turnover. And then I try to diagnose the many layers beneath that to see why people are leaving. And it's hard because sometimes it's leadership, sometimes it's culture, sometimes it's lack of resources, sometimes it's lack of vision and planning. And so it's not enough to be an entrepreneur. You have to be somebody that can be coached. You need to come to play. And I'm not looking for the people that are average. I'm not even looking for clients that are average. Like, I'm okay with the guy that looks at what we do and says, nah, because he's just letting himself out before I'm pissed off that he's quitting. And so in my mind, that's an easy, acceptable thing to me. And that wasn't always the case in the beginning when I was building 2020. I wanted everybody to come. I wanted to see what I could do. And today I'm just looking for the best in class.
If you're listening to this episode, I challenge you, pick up a copy of High Selling is a Drug. Follow Christine's journey. Christine, thanks for coming back. I can't wait for chapter 3. And we will all see you on the next episode of the Culture Matters podcast.
Thank you.